Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Rob Turley, your host at Down the Rabbit Hole podcast, where you can venture down the rabbit hole and see the world for what it really is, and in this case, the business world. But I've got, it's actually, I know a guy, and his name's Khalil, and he's with me right now, and he works with I Know a Guy, which I love that name because, who doesn't know a guy? I want to introduce him to everybody because I know a guy, right? But super exciting. He does a lot of growth consulting. He works and does some consulting for M&A, and he does everything under the sun from learning how to nurture leads, how to create relationships, how to network, and all that good stuff. So anything that has to do with growth. So Khalil, please.
Hey, well, thanks for having me, Rob. Hello from Central Florida. Thanks for having me. I'm definitely excited here today. As you mentioned, I function pretty much as a growth strategist and consultant. The simple answer is I help grow businesses, right? So
we got a lot in common.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
My favorite thing in the world to do is help people grow, help people achieve more, help people optimize.
That's it. And I love specifically, right, the very latter of that statement. Optimization is a huge part of that, right? So kind of a bit about what I've done and, where that's all come from, if you will. I started in the logistics and transportation space, right? Dealing with truck drivers and shippers all day, not exactly the most.
I remember that company name, LMF.
Yeah.
It hit me yesterday night. I was just like, the trucking company.
It was Total Quality Logistics was the name of the company. It was a freight brokerage, one of the largest in the nation. So we were responsible for cold calling, 150 calls a day, to develop a book of business. I mean, from building a book of business to managing the daily shipments to tracking to your own AR and accounts payable, it was basically a business, right, that I built there. So, I was there for 4 years. I was one of the top closers in the office out of 100 reps. Eventually became a sales trainer, due to my successful work on the floor. But man, you start to think, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? So eventually I left the company, got the entrepreneurial bug, as they say, right? And
it never leaves you.
Right. It never does. Once you got it, that's it. From there, my first attempt at entrepreneurialism, if you will, was to buy a $7 million trucking company. I'm sure you can imagine, Rob, I didn't exactly have $1 million in my bank account
right.
after leaving my job. So I was left to get creative to try and fund the transaction. So my first thought, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get a funding partner, right? A credit partner. It turns out the business was unfundable. It was unbankable due to the business owner having a divorce and a non-compete legal battle back to back. So,
oh shit, that's a mess.
Right. So he had those two big legal expenses running through his business. The performance of the business was strong, but because of that, it crushed his cash flow, made the business unbankable. So again, I'm left with creativity as opposed to cash. So in essence, what I did was, after looking at his financials, looking at his books, his infrastructure, I was able to, with a few creative tweaks to his business, add about $880,000 back to his net bottom line as cash, just through the right plan, not through, growing the company per se. In that regard, this was without any growth strategy. This was just pure optimization. And that kind of served as the springboard, if you will, for what I do now, which is coming in to say, okay, look, how could we accomplish this goal hypothetically if we didn't have the money available, right?
Which is a question that almost every business asks themselves, unless you're some mega enterprise, you're like a unicorn. You don't just have that money lying around. You got to get creative with it, whether it's a payment plan to make an acquisition, whether it's a shared revenue acquisition, whether it's there's all sorts of different things that you could do that puts you in a good spot. I mean, you could be paying it off for the next 10 years.
Yeah, correct.
With the company's revenue, paying that off, and then also there'd be like an equity margin on that usually.
Yep. So how do we do that without debt? How can we accomplish this without giving away or diluting equity, right? So that's how I look at things, if you will. I had a business partner friend of mine. He's an investment banker. He's done 16 billion of transactions. He would always say to me, "There's power in thinking broke," was his statement. Now, as an entrepreneur, that might sound counterintuitive, right? We got to have an abundance mindset, yes. But how could you accomplish everything you want to accomplish with strategy and creativity over more effort,
Well, abundance, I like that. Abundance
Yeah.
mindset is super important, but
Yes.
thinking like you're broke has nothing to do with abundance. It
Correct.
means that you don't have it currently. It doesn't mean that you cannot get it. Abundance is about everything's around you. It all flows in the universe and you can have it because it's there. You have to ask for it, yada, yada, yada. All
Yeah.
that good stuff. But then if you're broke, you could still have an abundant mindset. The
Correct.
amount of money you have in your account has nothing to do with your potential.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. And that's the foundation for what I do. It's coming up with creative strategies and workarounds, if you will. Maybe call me a professional bootstrapper, perhaps. If that was a skill set on LinkedIn, I'd put it on there, right? But that's been
almost no one could. Because, I don't like how the accelerators that are out there and a lot of the different associations that are out there are saying, oh, if you don't get funding, you can't do anything.
correct.
I'm living proof. You are living proof. It can be done, but it sucks.
Yeah.
But that sucking getting there is worth every single, drop of blood, every bead of sweat, and every tear that comes out of you along the way.
Yeah.
Just grinding until you get there. But it's not even really grinding. It's about working smart, not hard.
Correct.
That's where the optimization comes in. And less is more.
I love it.
Less is
100%.
always more. And it's like that with selling. It's like that with marketing. It's like that with everything. I like to use the example of this. There are 210 million Americans over the age of 18 in the US, which means you can process their data, you can cold call them, you can sell them. Everybody's so strung on generate more leads, generate more leads, generate more leads.
Right.
Well, how about this? What if you sold only to the US and you had that database of 210 million Americans? You have all the leads.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do now?
Yeah.
What do you do? You have them all. What, you're going to generate more leads? Nope. You're going to find out, okay, what's your TAM? What's your total addressable market?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 100,000 out of those 210 million. Look, you just shaved it down. It's not about selling to everybody. It's about selling to precisely who you should be. So generating leads in a way where you're generating people out of that grouping of 100,000 rather than slowly chipping away at the 210 million over like 40 years. That's what most people do. So it's about working smart instead of hard. Now, when you have those 100,000, that's your TAM. That's your total addressable market.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I like to call it is your YAM, your addressable market.
I like that.
How many of those? No one's going to have an entire market. That's impossible. It doesn't happen. It's called a monopoly and it's illegal.
No.
So exactly. So you have about, at best, if you are just, you're just like an overlord, you have 25% max, mostly, usually, right? Unless you're someone like Apple or Microsoft, right?
Right.
The most I've seen in the B2B space really is Salesforce, which is, I believe at this point, 47.6% of the market, but that's by revenue. That's by revenue. There are a lot less expensive products out there. So when you talk about population, it's much less.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
Yeah.
The thing is, they don't own the whole market, and they won't own the whole market. And if they do, there's something horribly wrong with this economy. That's what it is. It's a sickness. But the point is that your addressable market or your YAM versus your TAM is only going to be 25% or less. So how do you find out of those 210 million people, who are the 15 to 25,000 who are going to buy from you?
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take that rant, but it's a different perspective that people don't think. What if you already had all the leads? That's where the answer lies.
Yep. And let's take that even a step further. So this is where my mind goes, right? Let's
take it further.
Yeah, let's take it a step further, right? We're looking at the total addressable market, your addressable market. There's a level we can tap into even further than that, right? Not just who's going to buy, but what if we tapped into a focus on who's already buying? That's another level, right? How do we tap into people who are already buying? That's the path of least resistance when it comes to sales. Who's already spending the money on this, right? How do we tap into that? We always talk about pipeline, right? If I were to use this metaphorically, we always talk about pipeline and sales and so forth. Everyone's trying to create pipelines. Why don't we just plug into one that's already flowing?
That's right. And you can sell through your customer, your customer's customer, your customer's alumni, your alumni, strategic alliance partners, strategic partners, just channel partners, you name it. You could sell through them because you're turning the cold market into the hot market, because that cold lead that you want to contact knows Jim. You've known Jim and done business with Jim for 10 years. It's a whole different experience. I'm talking to people about this type of stuff all the time. And that's why I'm excited to be working with you soon.
Yes.
Because you see the philosophy behind this is a whole different game. It's not the same as it used to be. It's not a cold calling world. It's not a just dial for dollars, because the phone book is some crazy new thing. And then if someone gets a phone call, wow, I got a phone call. There's no other way anybody can connect with me except for snail mail. And it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
So how do you do that removal process and find the people that are connected to other people?
Yep.
How do you know that? We are in such a connected world. It's a different drive. It's a different experience. So your total addressable market has never been more accessible.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Especially, just like you mentioned now in this digital world, even especially now during a 100-year event like a pandemic, right? More and more people are becoming accessible online, right? They're expending their attention more online, right? People who already have built up a trusting client base, people who've already expended the marketing dollars to build up their audience, etc. How do you tap into those pipelines, right? Digital is a great place and a great way to do it.
And how would you do that? Because that's something that's very difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, great question. So this takes a few things, right? Most people as entrepreneurs, we're trained to always focus looking forward, right? Let's get to the next deal. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep progressing. That I love that spirit. I love that, that energy. But sometimes we have to take a moment to think strategically. And oftentimes that happens with reevaluation, right? How can we look back and based on what we have now, which is data, experience, etc., how can we leverage that to help us now move forward more effectively in an optimized fashion? So you ask how to do that. Hey, you got to know what message resonates with your audience, right? That message that you're looking for is in your audience's mouth, for lack of better terms. A lot of times we spend time trying to throw things, trying to figure out what works, when looking backwards, conducting a survey, perhaps looking at data is going to help to tell us what we need to do that. So you want the right message, right? You want your messaging to be on point. You want that to be narrowed and specific. So when someone reads it, they can clearly opt in or out on if it makes sense for them to want to speak further. Now that prior to that, even I'd say you want the right targeting, right? Whichever platform you're using, whether that's YouTube, LinkedIn, right, Facebook, what have you, in terms of digital, my particular preference and expertise is around LinkedIn, right? So you want the right targeting, right? How can I target the most relevant person that has the highest likelihood of resonating with my message, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then there are other targeting factors out there. I mean, targeting is my life. That's all I do.
Right.
That's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
But that's the point, is that the target is everything.
Yep.
You can create a message that is so effective.
Mm.
But like you were saying, with attention, people have been mixing up lately, especially all these intent data companies out there. And no hate on them. They're doing a great job. It's just that there's a difference between intention and attention.
Yep.
And it seems like the wires have gotten crossed there.
Mm.
Because you can be getting all the attention in the world, but there's not a single ounce of intent
Yeah.
or intention happening. And, interest versus intent, or interest versus actual desire, are two different things. It's about speaking to the person in a conversational format.
Yeah.
It's when they go on your website, they're having a conversation in their own head.
Yeah.
When you have a conversation with them while they're talking to themselves, is it giving them answers of what they're seeing on the screen? If you could tap into that is the ultimate potential.
I love
If
that.
you can tap into their head as you're messaging them, as you're feeding them content and doing all of that, that's the key. But that's one of the biggest areas that people have trouble with actually establishing a target, with establishing anything. It's difficult for them to understand. But when the target's off, you can have messaging built really well around a grouping of people that aren't your best target in the first place. They're interested. They do not have any intention whatsoever.
Yeah.
So how do we have that conversation with them and actually tie that together where we are talking to the right people? Once the target has been generated, the messaging should be built around the target. Listen to the market. But if the target's wrong, it doesn't matter how good your messaging is.
Correct.
It's not going to work that well.
No.
And if your messaging is really good and you're getting a lot of engagement, sales are going really well, if you adjust your target and actually correct your target to be optimized, oftentimes that messaging will fail.
Yeah.
Because it's not built for that target.
Correct. 100% agree. Both have to go, hand in hand with one another, without question. Once you have that right target, you dial in that messaging, right? That's what pushes the right target to the next step of wanting to, engage with you further.
Yeah, and I don't want people to fear too, because target correction is my life, right?
Mhm.
But the thing is, if you're doing really well, your business is doing really well, you're getting a lot of engagement, and you correct your targeting to do even better, and your messaging is no longer working, it's not because the target's wrong, it's because the message is wrong. So don't have that fear, because when you shift the target, the message is going to change too.
100%. 100% agree.
Because if you try to talk to everybody, you talk to nobody.
Correct.
You try to make everybody happy, you make nobody happy. If you try to influence everybody, you influence nobody. You usually become an outcast.
Yeah. Yeah. All of it has to be dialed in, right? And that goes back to optimization. And what I find oftentimes with a lot of business owners, a lot of enterprises, what they do is, as opposed to that step, which is optimized, they go to something else. They go to, all right, let's just pour more water into this bucket, if you will,
Yeah,
right?
they dilute it.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And that's what most people do. Okay, we need more salespeople. We need more marketing dollars for this current, marketing channel and this current iteration of my marketing. I just need to pump more, which is logical, right? You're not wrong. Hypothetically, yes. You pour more into that funnel, if you will.
You'll get more, but by ratio, it's usually worse.
Correct. It's actually more expensive now to acquire a customer, right? That's what I like to call toxic growth, right? If you will, because it's hindering what you, at the end of the day, as a business owner, right? We talk about growth, right? At the end of the day, I'm thinking that most business owners, they'd like to be able to utilize more cash to create more wealth, right? That doesn't always happen with more scale of your company. In fact, it could actually elongate your goals sometimes, right? When you pour more into that bucket, right? Let's spend more dollars on marketing. Which by default, again, you're going to have to grow the other systems of your business. You're going to have to expend more on infrastructure, fulfillment, etc. Right? Conversion. All of these things have to grow along with that. And inevitably, you're spending far more cash than you're actually ROIing, if you will, to see that desired return on that growth, right? So I like to put it this way, and Rob, I know this resonates with you, right? There is a difference between growth and scale, right?
Absolutely.
You can legitimately scale but not realize growth, right? But the other part of that is also true. You can actually grow without having to scale.
Yep.
Right. That's the part that I love, that goes along with optimization. That's the wheelhouse that I like to primarily focus on. How can we grow without needing to scale?
It's about making more money without spending more dollars.
Correct.
That's the key. Spending more money and making more dollars, that's one thing. That's great. That's what everybody does. But if you can get yourself to the point where you're making more dollars and spending the same, if not less,
Yep.
that's the key right there. That's how you know you're headed in the right direction in that respect.
That's it. That's the fastest route to, I would say, more profitability, right?
What would be the first thing that you would have people check on if that was the case? If they wanted to start doing something like that, where should they look first?
Great question. That kind of goes back to something I mentioned earlier, right? Taking a moment to think backwards, right? Let's start there. Are you actually spending time? And we hear this, it's anecdotal, if you will, but it's true, right? How much time are you spending in the business versus on it? How much time are you spending being strategic as compared to being only tactical, right? Only on execution, right? So I would start by first doing a bit of self introspection, right? To say, okay, what am I doing to actually grow as opposed to just scale, right? Those are the questions you want to ask yourself, right? So what can I do now without spending more money to hit my goals? That's the next question.
Yeah.
Challenge yourself to ask yourself that, right? Like, how could I grow without having to spend more? You'll be surprised at some creative answers that become available to you, right? When you start just sitting down to think strategically.
Or even people can look at it this way too. How can I spend a little bit to save a lot of it?
There you go.
Because that's not just locking everything up. Okay, how can I make more money magically?
Mm-hmm.
It's going, okay, if I spend money here, how much will it reduce my spend over here, here, and here?
Correct.
Will it make any of my processes redundant? Will it drag any part of my company down? Will everybody have all the resources, the enabling resources that they need to make it happen?
Mm-hmm.
Will this be a resource that can replace 4 other resources or tie something together so you can have that optimized process?
Yep.
And that's the thing, is that when the whole thing is disconnected, it makes it very difficult.
Yep.
Normalizing across your business is a great thing to do. But then again, when you normalize, innovation goes out the window.
Yep.
That's the thing. If the process is always the same, there's not a lot of it's a routine at that point.
Yep.
So it's good to have that differentiation, but some processes should be normalized because think about finance. When does that change? Same math, same numbers, same everything.
Yep.
It doesn't change. If you don't have it normalized, if you don't have it optimized, there's something wrong.
Yeah. Agree. Agreed. Otherwise, it's ad hoc, right? You got to figure it out every time.
Yep. Been there, done that with finance. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Not
yeah.
a good time, total waste of time.
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so when you're, let's say you're diving into a business, and
Mhm.
I'm going to give you a case scenario.
Yep.
Let's say the business was having difficulty because they were not doing an optimized outreach. Let's say they're not using multi-channel, they're just doing email sales
Okay.
and then the occasional cold call.
Hmm.
They're not using LinkedIn, they're not using all these other things. How would you approach them? Because you can't tell someone they're doing it wrong because it was right at some point in time.
It's working,
Yeah,
right?
it was working. It's
Working.
starting not to work. They're not sure what's going on. They're starting to decrease in valuation. They're starting to decrease in the revenue, and they're starting to go for that nosedive. They're just at the
Mhm.
cusp of it. They need to find out what's going wrong. Most people just say, it's just the time of the year, and then they just keep
Yep.
going down.
Yep.
But then if they get smart enough to realize, okay, it's us, it's not them,
Hmm.
because it is you. The market changes, people change, things
Yeah.
shift,
Yeah.
the business shifts, needs shift.
Yeah.
So how would you get them to a place where they could start introducing these new processes and without creating that shock, without firing the amygdala off?
Yeah. Yeah. If you will, without them having that knee jerk reaction of everything changes, right? So here's a few questions that I would think to ask, right? At the beginning of that process and dealing with this company per se, right? First things I'm going to ask are, I want to know your numbers, right? Do you know your current KPIs? Right? Or you're telling me that email is working, phone calls working, great. What does that mean exactly? How many emails do I have to send out before I receive back, an inquiry, and how many inquiries turn into a close, etc.?
A lot of people don't have those numbers.
Correct. Correct. So that's the first part. Again, looking
That's
backwards.
a gap in data
Yeah.
practices. You have to have good
Yeah.
data practices. Just how do you diagnose what's wrong if you don't even have all of the symptoms cataloged?
You don't even know what right means at this point,
No,
right?
no.
So that would be my first step. Let's look backwards, right, as opposed to trying to push forward. Because in this regard, when it comes to business, a lot of times, yeah, you're going to find a lot of valuable insight locked up in looking backwards. So how many inquiries does it take to get you a customer, etc.? Right? That's the first thing I'm going to ask. Right? Let's assume that they know that information. Right?
Yeah,
Let's
I'll give you the percentages. I can role play this with you.
right.
So, yeah, I would say, we contact 100 people and maybe five will respond.
5 will respond, and how many become a client? Probably 1 out of 5, perhaps.
Probably less than that.
Less. Okay. Okay.
Probably like half.
Okay. Okay. Now let's look at the phone call side. What are the metrics on phone call right now?
Phone calls. Oh God, I'm sick with this stuff. It
Mm.
takes approximately 3,476 cold calls in order to pretty much close one sale. So it takes. Here we go. Here we go. So it's about 36 calls to get one effective in
Okay.
the SaaS market. In the
Yeah.
SaaS market specifically, so it's
Mhm.
about 34 to 36 calls for one effective conversation.
Okay.
It takes approximately 16 to 18 effectives
Hmm.
in order to set one next steps meeting.
Okay.
And
Set it
then
up.
when you add it all together throughout the whole process, it's between 3,200 to 3,600 cold calls for one sale in the SaaS market.
Okay. So here's a question I would
And
ask.
if you're using an auto dialer, that's $3,600 in dials alone.
Correct. So here's a question I would ask. As opposed to using those independent of one another, let's start looking at what they could do collectively is one thing I would say. Right? Because statistically, what I've found is that when someone receives a written message first over elongated periods of time, right? We all know the statement, right? People do business with those they know, like, and trust.
That's right.
Right? You're developing familiarity before the call comes in, right? Now, which the email part can be done through automation primarily. So now, as opposed to doing a cold call, let's see if we can warm up the call. That's one way to start warming up calls, your outreach, so it's more familiar. The other part is let's look data wise. Let's look at, hey, out of all the people we're sending emails to, all the people who are interested, what do they have in common? Right? What do all those people have in common? All the people who weren't interested, what do they have all in common?
You're literally describing like my technology's business model.
I know, the shameless plug, right? So those are things I think of, right? Like something interesting, right, that I found in some of the campaigns that we do for whatever reason, I find that the over 40% of interested responses come from 5 particular states.
Really?
Weird, right? I still can't pinpoint
You know
why.
what's weird about that? The square root rule is that it's the square root of whatever it is, meaning that the bulk of everything comes from the square root. In that case, the square root of 50.
Mhm,
But then let's say square root of 100, that's 10. So
mhm.
out of 100, if let's say there are 100 states, 10 states would actually do it.
Yeah.
Square root of 50, it's going to be about 4,
Wow.
4 or 5.
There it
Yeah.
is. Like I don't know why, but for whatever, obviously one of them, the state I live in is Florida, right? Georgia is another one for me. I used to live in Georgia, but I was young at that time, so I didn't have any business, whatever the case is, any contacts, right? But California, Illinois, and Texas, those for whatever reason, those states, people, my connection rates on LinkedIn, for example, are significantly higher just focusing on those states, right? So how can I get more out of what I'm currently doing is my next question. How can we warm things up, right? So looking backwards again, right?
Their interests, their
Yep.
characteristics, their skills,
Mm-hmm.
the traits of what makes them who they are.
Correct.
What are they following? What are they doing? What do they care about? What do they value?
Yes. So how can I incorporate all those things to increase that know, like, and trust factor? Are questions I'm going to ask to help optimize this situation. So we came up with a couple just now, right? How can we warm up our phone call outreach? And we could do that by more drip campaigns and sequences first before calling, right? That's an automated way that really doesn't, how much more time or effort or cost is that going to take, right? If anything, it's going to cost you less effort because now you're dialing less, right? So you're getting more results because now they're more optimized, right? They're more seasoned, if you will.
And you're talking
Lead,
about a dialer too, which if you're using like a parallel assisted dialer, that's $1 a dial.
boom. There.
Dollar a dial on the dot, and that's not including the labor, it's not including the time, the scripting,
Correct.
anything like that.
Correct. So if you were to optimize that right there, you're going to get more results with less effort and cost, right? And then the next step, let's look backwards, right? What are some similarities amongst all the people that were interested, right, over the course of your business? What if we specifically targeted those types of, that persona, if you will? Again, you're going to increase conversion, and you're actually going to expend less effort and cost doing so.
I love how you're saying this because, for example, one process that my business has is that we create the persona, right? It's a
Mhm.
mathematically defined persona, so it's about as perfect as it can be. From there, it's creating micro personas. So it's looking at a specific title or a specific job function that comes from a specific background, that has a specific level of education, and so on. So you're going to talk to that human the same way, no matter what industry or whatever they're in.
Yep.
From there, it's about using the industry to change the language. And then from changing the language of the industry, you use their company size or a sub factor like that so you can speak to the pain.
Yep.
You're going to find companies of the same ilk, of the same industry,
Yep.
of the same size are going to have extremely similar pains that pretty much go across the market. Then when you go to a different company size, it's going to have a separate set of pains that's really all going to line up too.
Yep.
It's usually an industry-wide issue. So it's really easy to use that as a differentiating factor.
There it
Talking
is.
to a human being and relating to them is the hardest part, but being relatable is the largest factor of it. It's called being relevant at scale. You cannot scale personalization, but you could scale
Relevance. I like that. Yeah, that's 100%. So those are a couple ways right there that I would look to optimize their outreach. Now, here's the next part. This is the next level, right? So next thing I'm going to also look at are areas and opportunities. Okay, whatever this SaaS platform company does, how can I find companies who are complementary to you, not competitive, and even in instances where they are competitive, that could be a partnership. Yeah,
Our
absolutely.
strongest partners, like my strongest partners, are adjacent competitors.
Yep.
Those are the strongest partners that we have, probably the same strongest partners that you have too. But if you can learn how to partner with your enemy,
Yep.
they're quote unquote enemy. They're not enemies, they're adjacent competitors. They may steal part of your market share because they're a replacement, a potential, not a replacement, but an alternative.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I wouldn't even call them stealing market share. It's just, look, if you can, you
That's why
can
it's a market share.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. It's share, market share, right? Sharing is caring. But even in those instances, right? These buckets, if you will, people who are already buying, right? I want you to think about this for all the business owners listening, right? What are things that people buy before, during, or after doing business with you? Think about that, right?
And true. Also, who are their suppliers?
Correct.
How much do they rely on these suppliers? If they really rely on them and they're using this technology or this service, whatever it is, that's helping them grow big time, don't you want your supplier to also grow and be stable? Because people need stability. They need consistency.
Yep.
They also need to know that they can trust them. So why not help your supplier grow by offering, say, hey, I use this, you should use it too, because it will help you grow. You'll make money. It'll keep you stable, because if they went down, you go down with them.
That's it. That's it. So let's look at it from this regard, right? I'll use another example. Let's say you sell houses, right? You're a realtor, as an example, right? Think about all the things that a homeowner goes through before, during, and after engaging a realtor. Let's say they successfully buy the house. What else do they need? They need insurance.
Yep. They need furniture.
There you go, right? So think about all those. Those are all different areas of need that your ideal client needs to, they have to engage with that, right? How do you tap into those, right? Now, creating strategic alliances like that, same thing with SaaS, right? It's different, various SaaS platforms, right? You know, our example, right? I do LinkedIn. Rob here does data analytics, right? Boom. There's a lot of overlap there.
Perfect fit right there. And one of my favorite examples of this, for like a pathway, is in the finance industry, because it's so straightforward. Is that, have you ever met an accountant that isn't partnered with a bank?
Bam.
Have you ever met a bank that isn't partnered with an accounting software?
Yeah, there it is.
Right? And have you ever met an accounting software that isn't integrated or partnered with a CRM?
Yeah.
Have you ever met a CRM that isn't integrated with a marketing platform or with some sort of outreach platform?
Yeah.
No, it's all tied together, where all those connections that are made, but then who is actually integrated with the most people? What's the hub?
That's it.
Where does it stick?
Yeah.
And that's usually going to be the accounting software.
Yeah.
They're partnered with the banks. They're
Yeah.
partnered with the accountants. They're partnered with the CRMs. They're partnered with the ERPs, all of that stuff. But why would a bank be partnered with an ERP? It doesn't make any sense. So where do you see the most crossing? The places where, I mean, for example, if you have an accounting software, you could just decide not to have an accountant. You could do it yourself. Right. Or you can have an internal. So that could be an adjacent competitor, technically, if it's like if it's a finance automation platform or an accounting automation platform. But even still, nobody wants the freaking headache behind the numbers, so they just hire an accountant anyway. Sure, most of it's automated. You still have the accountant. Now it's more lightweight work, and you're getting paid the same amount of money. Boom. Your cost of service just went down, and you're still working with the same amount of people, if not more, because that frees you up, because most of it's being automated and taken care of.
Correct. There you go. And right off the bat, several things have happened just in that, as you mentioned, right? To preface that, your client, your pipeline has increased. You've added a new profit center, right? And your fulfillment, right? Able to solve more problems for clients without having to go hire more.
That's right.
Right? You just grew without having to scale.
All you did was set up a relationship with somebody.
That's it. Leveraging the expertise, the resources, etc., the relationships of others, right? It's one of my most favorite ways to grow businesses, right? And that can happen again with quote unquote competitors, whether that's upsell or downsell, right? I like to frame it this way, right? You and another company could have the same offer or solution, but if you two have two different methods in which you achieve it, there's a valid area of opportunity for partnership there, because now you can add more value to the client base through two different methods.
Sticking with the fintech thing, to actually add to that point, to give you an example, I mean the listener here,
right?
But to give you an example would be, okay, you have QuickBooks and then you have NetSuite. What small business or mom and pop shop is going to use NetSuite? That's insanity. It's meant for enterprises, large mid-market enterprises. They're going to use QuickBooks. So if NetSuite can't sell them, why not send them to QuickBooks? Because then you get the revenue share from the referral. Yeah. But then NetSuite would have never gotten that client unless later down the road they may try to steal them, but then they have no actual drive to do so. And if they're moving up from QuickBooks and they know they won't stay with them, even though QuickBooks does have an enterprise offering, it's just that nobody really wants it. I don't know why. Maybe it's the marketing. I have no idea. Not my business.
Lack thereof.
But they can pass them to NetSuite and then get a chunk of change from that as well. Right. So they can work with each other rather than playing a tug of war. They can support one another.
There it is. And that's the other part, right? So let's say you have the same offer, but two different methods. Let's say you even have the same offer, the same method, but two different price points, right? Now imagine filling your kind of Rolodex, if you will, with 7 or 8, 10 other companies, right, that do what you do but have different price points, and let's say you're less expensive than the other options, right? You have 8 other companies sending pre-warned high quality business that are interested, that want to move forward, but they couldn't afford.
They literally just cannot afford the solution. Therefore, they're going to go with you by default.
Boom. That's it.
And it's not a loss to that company because they'd never sell them in the first place, number one. But number two, now they're getting like 10, 20% off of it.
Correct. And they didn't have to fulfill.
That would have been zero money before. Yeah. Now it's 10 to 20% of whatever they're paying without doing any work.
Correct. And then on top of it, like we mentioned, the backside of that is finding other solutions that your audience needs, right? Your ideal client has need of. So those are just a couple examples, right, of how to grow without scale, how to do less or how to do more with less, right? And there are other areas around that, but a lot of that, I would say, happens when we stop and think strategically. We kind of look backwards. We leverage data, right, to say, how can I get the highest use out of everything I already have?
Yeah, and trying not to get reactive.
Yeah.
It's about being proactive and responsive. You don't want to be, the reactive decision is we need more salespeople. We need to double the emails. We need to double the phone calls. And then you're creating a whole world of brand damage.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that's the reactive response. If you sit back and think about it, just take a good long think about it, speak with your teammates, speak with your board, whatever it may be, you can start coming up with these decisions in a much more effective way rather than just trying to it's just balls to the wall, drive it.
Yeah.
You know, that's not always the answer. And often you're at more of a loss.
Yep. Toxic growth, 100%. You can scale without growth, unfortunately, but I'd rather grow without having to scale.
And what's one of the best examples, or I guess the worst examples, of a toxic growth situation that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've seen situations where companies, again, they go the more marketing route, the more et cetera. But with it, hey, let's hire more sales reps and so forth. You could triple your top line and find out that you're making the same money, right? After implementing all of that, sometimes less, right? As the business owner, right? So that just happens. I've seen that, several times over. The other part of that, I'm often dealing and working alongside companies that are seeking investment, right? Because what most companies do, most business owners, when they want to grow or when there's a problem, the first thing they think about is typically, I need more money.
Yeah, I need more money. I need more money. I need more money. Money is just energy. That's all it is. It doesn't mean anything.
So it's like, look, we could achieve this through resourcefulness without needing additional resources, right? So those are situations I've seen where, again, they're leveraging all the wrong tools.
That's funny that you just said that. You could be you could lack the resources, but if you're resourceful, which means full of resources by direct definition, except being resourceful is using the resources that you have in the best possible way. It doesn't mean that you're acquiring more resources per se. And I want to make that clear. I mean, I know it's like kindergarten to you, but I want to make that clear to everybody listening, because being resourceful is making the most out of the resources that you have rather than trying to get more to do more.
Yeah, agreed. That's it right there. How do you get more out of what you currently have? When you start thinking like that, and to answer your question earlier, Rob, if I had to stop anyone to say, okay, what do I need to do right now? This is it. Stop and ask yourself, how can I get more out of what I already have?
Yeah, and that goes the same way for sales too, because you can sell a lot within your existing client ecosystem.
Yeah.
Who's more likely to buy than someone that's bought before? Same question, but in your own sales.
Yeah.
Are they happy? Are they getting value? Can you upsell them? Probably.
Yeah. Can you solve other problems for them? They're probably already paying somewhere else for it. And here's the thing, again, you don't have to go build the new solution.
People love to consolidate.
Yep.
They love to consolidate. So it's like, oh, I'm using this guy over here, but they don't really have that good relationship with them. You have a great relationship, you can snatch up that business in half a second.
Yeah, that's it.
It's pretty much already yours.
Yeah.
All you have to do is ask.
Yep. That's it. That's it. You just have to know that.
The worst thing that can happen, they could say no. Oh no. That's the thing, is that people think, I don't want to bother them. The worst thing that can happen is to say, oh no, thanks, I'm good, because you have a good relationship. No, I'm all set. I'm happy with these guys.
They've already given you their credit card. So, I mean, where are you going to hear more no's from someone who already gave you your credit card, or from brand new people you keep bringing through the door.
And that's why they do like those samples, things like that. Here, you can have it for $1. They just spent $1.
Yeah,
They're more likely to spend. That's why, cover charges at bars. It's to make the doorman money, of course, because they need security, whatever.
yeah.
But really, what they're doing is that they're priming someone. They paid $5 to get in.
Buying behavior.
They are going to spend well over $5 on drinks because they said, "Oh, I spent 5 to get in. I may as well spend 10, 20 when I walk in." It's that same so that whole at the door charge.
Yeah.
Tickets started it because you're paying for an experience, but when you're just walking to a bar, there's a cover charge. It's to give it the feeling of exclusivity, and it's to actually warm up the person to spending money.
That's it.
You won't walk in, dance, then leave. You already spent $5, so you may as well. Why not spend another 5, another 10, another 20, another?
Go ahead. You got it. Go ahead. I love it. I love it. That's it, man. Tapping into what's there at the most effective level.
One of the best areas, though, is insurance for that.
Yeah.
Insurance companies are missing out on so much revenue because that revenue that market's tapped, man. It's tapped. It is dry, squeezing blood from a stone to try to acquire new people, unless they just became of age and need insurance.
Right.
It's that type of a thing. You're squeezing blood from a stone, but it's not actually a stone. It's like a water balloon filled with blood, right? They just don't know how to squeeze it. They don't know it's a water balloon. And it's cross-selling capabilities within their existing clientele. I forget where this. It's like, I think it's a statistic or something along those lines. But I don't know it for exact either. So take it for what it is. It's about the lesson. It's not about the number in this one. So just letting everybody know. Don't quote me on this. Is that about 40% of their potential revenues in their existing client base, because they get very comfortable. All of their representatives get comfortable. They're good at selling 1, 2, maybe 3 of those different insurances or services. And they're not comfortable selling the others because they've seen a lot of success in the ones they're currently selling. So they have usually a product portfolio of 7 to 8 things. So they're selling maybe 3. They could be selling them 2, 3 more products, and they're not cross-selling. So all that potential revenue is just, it's gone. And if you're already doing business, bundle it. Here's 3% off.
That's it. That's it.
And that locks them in for a long time. Like, I buy all my insurance from one place. Because why wouldn't I? It brings down the cost of all of my other insurance, and I trust the person who I buy it from.
That's it. I was just gonna say, and you brought up the key word, right? It all goes back to know, like, and trust.
Because what's the difference between an insurance versus another insurance? All the way down to the fine print, it is exactly a carbon copy. What's the difference between Allstate and Geico and Progressive? Literally nothing. It's the experience you had when speaking to the individual, or, my family uses that. Oh, my dad's always used it, and they've been great. Yeah, if you used Progressive, it would have been the exact same experience.
It's an easy segue for them, right? People do business. It's all about, if a huge part of that, like we said, right? It's familiarity, right? It's that trust factor. How much can you leverage already built up trust?
And that's the thing. It's hard for people in the B2B space, though, to think that way. They think they do business with businesses. A business does not buy. People do. People maketh the company. I've said this 1,000 times. Because it's just a bunch of people working toward the same mission, vision, and purpose. You hope.
Idealistically,
to try to achieve a goal and add value, and then ultimately bring in money so everybody can pay their bills and go home at night and feed their families. That's all it is. So you're selling to people at a business. You're not selling to a business. I don't see 2 buildings bumping into each other like this and money's getting passed across. That's not how it works.
It's 2 handshaking, person to person, P to P.
I like that, handshaking. I like saying H to H because it's human to human.
There you go. I dig that.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Person to person, human to human, it's always a personal experience. And just like buying anything is a personal experience. Anything at all that you purchase, you had a reason, you had an emotional purpose, you have an emotional reason and drive behind why you're buying it. Then you use logic to justify that decision. Logic is just justification. That's all it is.
That's it.
Wow, I really want this thing. It seems really cool. And then it's like, hold on a second, wait. Yeah, I can use it for that and that. No, it seems good enough. Whether they need it or not, it's irrelevant. It's about what the people want.
Well, you got to know your market, right? And that goes back to, looking backwards.
And how do you feel about the want versus need thing? Because often when you build something that people need, they don't want to buy it. They want what they want, and they're not sure what they need. what would your suggestion be? I'd love to hear your
Great question. So I love the approach. So people call it consultative selling, but more specifically, I like to create an exchange through training and education. What do I mean? Right. Right. And goes to bridging the gap between that want and need kind of scenario. Sometimes you have to help educate someone on the two, right? And bridging them together, right? You don't want it to only just be logical, right? You want to solve a pain point. Psychologically, people typically make decisions based on two factors: either try to get a desired reality or a perceived benefit, or to get away from pain. Those are two driving factors, right? How do you leverage both, right? Because typically speaking, when it comes to pain, very few people are like, I only need to get out of this pain. I don't want to. Nobody really says that when it comes to pain. It's
they shove it down.
Yeah, like,
shoving it down.
Oh yeah, sure. Like I don't need to. No, it's probably both.
They fear it. They fear the change. They're like, if I try to solve this, I might just completely botch the whole thing.
Yep, which is the education component, right? You being their advisor, if you will, through this scenario, right, is going to be a huge help to them. It's also going to be a differentiator, right? It's one thing to be a salesperson to present something. It's another thing to leave them with a renewed perspective, right? And when you can show them, right, not only the logic behind it, but the pain it's removing by moving forward, right? You're going to tap into both that need and want, right? And that ability truly comes from knowing your audience, right? Why don't you ask your current clients, why did you start with us? What were you hoping to get from us when you started?
That should be something that's asked at the end of the sale. Well,
Yep.
The sale never does really end.
Or even possibly the first month or two of doing business together. You say, hey, we're doing a survey or so forth. What led you to?
Like, so all of our salespeople and the people that I consult,
Mhm.
I say this is that right when someone buys, so why are you excited about this? Why did you decide to work with me?
I like that.
They give you that unvarnished truth right there. That needs to be input into the CRM. Reason
Right there. Yeah.
Reason in the CRM. You have a reason. That is the reason, not closed one reason. That's from the company's perspective.
Yeah.
Reason is their reason, literally quoted in their words. And
Yep.
you document that. And you give it right to the fucking marketing team, because otherwise they have no idea how to talk to anybody. That is the reason. And then a month later, check in or QVR's quarterly value report.
Yeah.
What is the value? Why are you still working with us? Right there. And that should be documented. So why did they buy? Why are they continuing to work with us and getting value? And how come they're being loyal?
Yes.
Those questions are answered, which is some of the hardest questions to answer. So there should be infrastructure in place that grabs that information at all times. And you'll see a lot of resistance with salespeople saying, why would I need to document that? Do you want good leads from marketing? Really? Do you want them?
Right. Or are you complaining about the quote unquote leads? Right. That's where that comes from, because the two aren't talking to each other.
You're speaking their language at that point. It's in the words of the customer why they bought. That's what everybody wants to hear.
That's it.
I love it. And right there, that's a good place to end this. I'm sorry we are out of time here. But so, Khalil, thank you so much for being here. What is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me. Send me a direct message there. My name is Khalil Stultz. So find me on LinkedIn. Be happy to have a conversation to talk about how this could be applicable for your operations.
Yep. Again, he's with I Know a Guy, and that's Stultz as in STULTZ.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. No problem. So thank you again, everybody. This is Down the Rabbit Hole podcast, brought to you by White Rabbit Intel, where you can know more, win more, and close often with advanced sales enablement and sales intelligence, artificial intelligence. Targeting at its finest, so that you can distill it down and not go through those 210 million. You can get right to that 25,000 of your addressable market. I like using that right at the end right there. That was good because I did the thing earlier. Yeah. But, so if you please follow, please comment, please do whatever you'd like with it. If you repost this, all I ask is that you tag me and use hashtag DTRH podcast, everybody. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Down the Rabbit Hole podcast for new episodes weekly on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, and YouTube. If you'd like to apply to be featured on the podcast or recommend a featured guest, please feel free to email us at theteam@whiterabbitintel.com.